I'm going to get things rolling. Thank you all for joining us today. Really happy to have this great group of people assembled, and we're gonna get going. So I'm Kate Harrington. I'm the Outreach and Engagement Manager for Movability. Movability is Central Texas's Transportation Management Association, TMA, a term most of you are probably familiar with. And we are the only TMA in Central Texas. So we work with employers, individuals, and service providers to reduce drive-alone trips in the region and connect Central Texans with better commutes. It goes without saying that the last year and a half has been one of intense upheaval, including disruption to typical commute patterns. At the same time, there are lots of new things going on with mobility solutions, from new service models, new providers, new technology. And today we're going to talk with a range of mobility providers to hear about the role shuttles and vanpools can play in bringing people back to work in a post-COVID landscape. Before I turn to our panelists for their introductions, I wanted to mention that Movability has a number of events coming up this summer, as well as some new services and programs that we're going to be launching. So to be in the loop about those, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and sign up for our monthly newsletter. You can do that at the bottom of our homepage. It's really easy, and I promise it's good content. After our panel discussion, we will have time for Q&A. So please, if you'll see there should be a box in the bottom that's Q&A specifically. If you enter your questions into the Q&A field as you have them, we'll get to those towards the end. So I'm now going to hand things off to our panelists and have them introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about their roles. And Dominic, why don't we start with you?
Oh, great. Thank you, Kate. So, hello, everybody. My name is Dominic Haig. I'm Chief Revenue Officer, for TRAC in San Francisco, despite the accent. Excuse me. So TRAC, we're a mobility technology company, and we provide a SaaS mobility management and reservation system to agencies, property managers, TMAs, and operators of fixed route and on-demand services in any kind of multi-passenger vehicle. It could be vans, buses, and we're about to roll out on some ferries. So anything with several people on them. Our focus is on a couple of things. A best-in-class zero friction experience for riders and ease of use for the transportation manager, and I'm sure we'll be talking more about that. We also partner with Loom, who some of you might be aware of, who've integrated TRAC into their commute benefits management platform. Now, I've been working in mobility technology for about 10 years, and I love engaging in these discussions. So if you'd like to have a chat later, feel free to send me an email. I think my address is on the flyer for the event. And finally, I'll say I think the interest in today's webinar shows that this new world of work and mobility and where will people be working from and so on does need fresh thinking and more flexible technology solutions. I'm looking forward to the discussion. I would like to thank Movability for inviting us to take part.
All right, Matthew, you're up.
Well, yeah, first off, thank you all for tuning in, and thank you to the Movability team for setting up this webinar and having me on. My name is Matthew Iomi, and I'm the co-chief executive here at Fedi. Now, Fedi is a group rideshare company that utilizes a network of 15-passenger Sprinter vans to service groups and businesses with on-demand and scheduled group transportation. Now, Fedi services two segments, groups and businesses, and our Fedi Business is the segment that I'll be focusing on here today. Fedi Business connects businesses and organizations with 15-passenger Sprinter vans to service employees, clients, customers, etc. And due to our ride-sharing model, we pride ourselves on the ability to provide businesses with flexibility and affordability. I'm excited to be here and look forward to contributing to today's discussion. Thanks, Gabe.
I believe I'm up next. Time to shine. Sorry, my phone was ringing, folks. I am Bobby Lauderyoung, the Sustainable Commute Director here at Bus Up. We are a global shared shuttle ecosystem provider specializing in electric and autonomous vehicles. Thanks for having us, Kate.
Hello, my name is Sherry Mendoza. Typically, I sit in Austin, Texas, but I am broadcasting from my hometown in Mililani Town, Hawaii. My name is Sherry Mendoza. I am the commute account executive with Commute with Enterprise and Metro Rideshare locally in the Austin market. What we do is we provide a comprehensive solution which is backed by Enterprise for companies to enable their employees to ride to and from work in recent model year vehicles while lowering their commute expenses and allowing them to be more productive while enjoying the ride to and from work, which are the three fundamental factors for retaining and recruiting employees, especially in times of COVID and in the post-COVID world.
Hey everyone, I'm Shoria, the CEO and founder of Fleet. Fleet's actually a all-in-one sort of commuting solution for employee commuting. We bring all forms of flexible mobility programs from shuttles, vanpools to micromobility under one roof and empower employees and employers with a whole new set of tools and technology to really drive adoption and kind of bring down ease of use for mobility programs. We're really excited to sort of democratize access to these commuting superpowers from large corporations and thrilled to be able to bring that to Central Texas as well. Thanks for having us, Kate, too.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. I get to wrap up the introductions, being a Z. So my name is Jillian Zoss. I'm the VP of Business Development with WeDriveU. WeDriveU is a shuttle transportation provider. We specialize in providing on-demand and fixed route services for companies, organizations, business parks, universities, and hospitals across the nation. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, everyone. All right, so we're going to launch in. We're going to get started by talking about what's new for shuttles and vanpools in 2021 and beyond. Let's talk about how shuttle options and software are different than they were even a few years ago. And Bobby, I'd like you to kick this one off.
Yeah, gladly. Well, first of all, I think that a unification of solutions is paramount. So that's really what Shoria was just speaking to. I think that more TDM solutions that are integrated drive utilization, which of course drives the behavior change that we all want to see away from, say, driving single occupancy vehicles. All of these things really matter, but they're stronger together. And I think we hear that phrase a lot, but it couldn't be emphasized anymore. One thing that we're doing at Bus Up is we recently partnered with Edenred on a global strategy to continue this unification from our end. So yeah, that I would say that that's something that's really big. The other thing as well to mention is shared shuttles are very important in order to, as Shoria put it, democratize access to a lot of these programs that are just in their nature expensive, so that small and medium-sized companies can provide to their employees and their workforce the same level of support that companies that only, larger companies that have only historically had the resources to be able to provide these things have been doing. So yeah, again, very happy to be here, and those are the couple of things that we're seeing from Bus Up's end.
Matthew, since you're next on my screen, I'll let you kick
Definitely. And then Bobby covered a lot of great stuff. And I think this is an exciting time for transportation because I believe the pandemic has opened the eyes of many when it comes to mobility. With the shutdowns that came, everyone experienced something that they never thought, especially in Austin, a lack of traffic congestion. Now, although congestion is returning, this revelation is a sign of what could be. And of course, all of us here are trying to make that the new norm. Now, right now in the US, over 75% of commuters choose to drive alone in their car. When translated, this means 115 million cars are on the road with exactly one person each. A statistic that, of course, is increasing as the workforce grows. Now, I think we can all agree that the future of transportation is large volume shared mobility. And here at Fetty, we've taken a unique commuting approach that prioritizes flexibility and affordability when considering hybrid that works well, especially. Now, with our dual segment model, we're able to offer unique service to businesses. Employers can conveniently add or remove vehicles as their needs change, which works great with this changing environment that we're that we're working on. There's no commitments. And additionally, because our vehicles generate revenue in the off hours by servicing groups on demand, similar to Uber, employees don't need to worry about breaking the bank when setting up their commuting plan. Now, with these new technologies that can provide better commuting flexibility and affordability, I believe we're going to see more companies build out extensive commuting plans who before thought that it was impossible and would break the bank.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I'll just make a quick one too. I think what Matthew mentioned too is spot on. I think the whole idea of leveraging flexibility as a strong lever was definitely a really big eye-opening event for, I think, everybody from this giant work from home experiment. And then although all of us in the transportation space have obviously been championing this for a long time, and we know that setting up alternatives and first and last mile options is going to be key to driving that false sense of lack of flexibility if I don't drive. But I think that translated really well out of the pandemic when it came to flexibility with working hours, flexibility with office locations, and now it's almost a necessity for people coming back, right? Where almost 60+% of folks are wanting to leave a job if they're forced to come back full time. And that's sort of a transition from people now being forced to, rethink the employee commuting experience beyond just can I offer flexibility with work times, can I offer flexibility with work locations, but how do we actually bridge that, first last mile from the door to desk and offer flexibility even in sort of mobility options and actually tackle, TDM in a more mainstream fashion has really been a really nice kind of pleasant silver lining to what we're coming out of in the transition from the pandemic this year.
Yeah, I think what has really I think been changing, and Sharia mentioned flexibility. I think that's obviously key. Is as people are starting to return to work, make sure that there's flexibility in that. But this time that we've spent at home and not commuting, I think has also allowed us to relook at our programs. What can we offer to employees? What does that look like? And what is that going to look like when it's coming back? And so I think the major thing that We Drive You has seen with our customers is they're really looking at revamping their programs, what is going to be effective, not only for the short term, but long term, and also looking at environmental goals. So not only are we reducing driver loan rates, but looking at electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles. That's been something that we've seen. It's been a huge change from before the pandemic. People are really trying to think out towards the future and set goals for what their programs are going to look like and how that's going to be impacting the environment.
If I might jump in at that point, so there's some great points there. And we go to Matthews first of all, talking about congestion. I keep an eye on these numbers in the San Francisco Bay Area. I see that right now the San Francisco Bay Bridge, which is a major choke point, is at about 90% of pre-pandemic traffic, but BART is at 20% of normal ridership. So that's not sustainable. You get a few more people in cars, and not only will the bridge lock up, but there'll be nowhere to put all the cars. So couple of great points there. Let me touch on two. One is in the area of technology and one in the area of what this new world is like, to your question, Kate. First of which, I think key issues are for employers, people running commute services, cost efficiency. There's uncertainty about budgets, there's uncertainty about demand, how many people are going to want to travel, when are they going to want to travel. So figuring that out, and what I call rebuilding the demand map. So where are people going to want to come from and when are they going to want to come from there? So being able to flexibly respond to that. For example, we're seeing an interesting strategy coming. We're supporting with some customers with Track, which is of starting to rebuild with on-demand services, getting that detailed ridership data, and then seeing where there's sufficient demand to put in fixed routes. And the other one, of course, is sharing services. And again, technology can make that a lot easier. But we're about to roll out on a service now where there are 4 companies participating in the service, and they have allocated capacity on the vehicles, but all 4 of them have different fare policies. Some are free, some charge 1 monthly pass rate to their employees, others are taking a free commute deduction. So being able to accommodate that is important. One other thing I just wanted to mention, I'm sure we'll get onto vanpools separately, is just around technology, because with the SaaS tools and so on that are out there now, I'll give one example of the ways that you can now rapidly deploy and reduce friction in this kind of mobility environment. One example is what we do at Track, that we use a technology called a progressive web app. So riders on your system don't need to download and install yet another app on their phone to see where the vehicles are, make reservations, all that kind of stuff. It doesn't require any app download at all. And I don't know about you, but that's when my dog's vet wants me to download an app, I start to fight back.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on the word that I think we're hearing the most of, which is flexibility. Let's talk about how we actually do that, because I think that is the $1,000,000 question. One thing that we've found to work successfully for our team is employing a multi-operator strategy. So at Bus Up, we purposefully and strategically will source 2 or 3 shuttle operators in order to serve a single client or multiple clients if they're sharing in a program. Why we do this is, one, it reduces risk. How? If one operator goes belly up, there's another there to support it. 2, it reduces costs. How? It keeps operators accountable because naturally they don't want to lose ground to one another. They want to play nice in the sandbox and keep their rates compatible. But also 3, it enables the flexibility that we're all talking about. How? Well, if you have not just a given fleet available through a contracted operator, but 3, 4 fleets through 4 contracted operators, and you have a managed services provider, which is really kind of Bus Up secret sauce, then we can pull and exchange vehicles from any given operator in order to meet a changing demand, maybe not on a daily basis, which I know is optimal, but close to it. And as time goes on, all of our technologies will improve, our efficiencies will improve, and we'll get closer and closer to being able to turn around between what is tomorrow's demand and how do we serve it.
And you hit on what I think, the $1,000,000 question is, what emerging trends are we going to continue to see? I think everyone wants to know that in terms of, commute demand, but also technology. Any thoughts about emerging trends that are going to continue to shape shuttles and vanpools in particular?
Yeah, if I might jump in there, there's one which is a very obvious one right now, and is very interesting. Is in terms of vanpools, which is an area we also support. So the old vanpool model, you have the same 6 people 5 days a week for the rest of their lives, does not work so well in this current environment where people may not be going in all days of the week. And so being able to then support what we call dynamic vanpools. So maybe you've got 6 people in the van, but it's drawn from a pool of 20 or 25 people who are making reservations on a daily basis. Or you have 4 core riders who are there every day, and then you've got 2 or 3 hot seats that people can book. So I want to fill up the van. So it can sustain and build a vanpool model, which is great and is very cost effective. Obviously, if you're not paying the driver, order of magnitude less than a shuttle, but make it work for this modern environment.
Yeah, and to hop off of what Dominic is saying, continuing to be flexible and understand what the actual end user is looking for when it comes to their commutes and what they're needing to satisfy that demand. With Enterprise, we are definitely a forward-thinking company. We understand that as people return to work, that there's going to be questions about, hey, there's going to be weeks that I can only ride 2 days a week, or this vanpool needs to keep going 7 days a week because we have people on the same shift but that work different days, and offering that flexibility in order for those that need the transportation whenever they do need it, and not having a fixed schedule, fixed route, fixed roster. So definitely, as we continue into the post-pandemic world and using what we learned during the pandemic, we do need to make sure that we're continuing to be flexible, listen to our clients and customers, and trying to adapt to those needs. So just speaking on Enterprise, I have to give the corporate answer of I can't really say exactly what we're working on, but it is something that we have continued to discuss, and the feedback that we've gotten from our big partners as we continue to move forward. And hopefully we can start looking at the dynamic vanpooling as an option, not just in Austin, but nationwide. And then, of course, with the trends of people going back to work, back to what my colleagues were saying, I mean, people are always constantly looking for a new job, whether or not you're happy in your job or not happy in your job. I mean, one of the things they always tell you is even if you are pretty content at your job, always continue to look for a job. Well, as people are starting to return back to work and wanting that hybrid workplace or just complete remote back to work, what they're seeing is about 1 in 4 people, even if they did just get hired on, or if they are okay with where they're at, they're still actively looking for another job. So what can we do as decision makers, working either in talent acquisitions, operations, this high level decision makers? What can we do to make sure that our top talent that we worked so hard and spent so much money developing does not leave us? And again, what are we saying? Offering additional transportation commute solutions to those people, especially since a lot of companies pre-pandemic especially didn't take into account with how burdensome their employees' commutes are, and it's seen as an employee burden rather than an employer burden. Now I know we're seeing a lot of companies wanting to do the hybrid workplace. That's the trend right now. That's what's trendy right now, but things can always change. Behavior scientist John Levy said that even though this is something that's really popular right now, it's not sustainable, because at the end of the day, we as human beings need that community, and being around people ultimately helps with productivity, communication, and success. So definitely, as we move into the post-COVID world, we have to remain proactive rather than reactive, and making sure that we're keeping those employees from going into their single occupancy vehicles and starting to offer those additional transportation solutions to break a bad habit before it even starts. Because I think once someone sees that it's more convenient for them to drive in, it's really hard to break a habit. I'm a creature of habit, so I know once I start getting into something, it's hard for me to break that habit. So it's a really good time to start having that conversation and seeing what additional commute solutions you can offer to your people as time progresses.
Yeah, and that leads well into the next question I wanted to put in front of y'all, which is how can shared mobility like vanpools and shuttles benefit a variety of commuters? We've tossed around the word democratize a little bit this morning, not just talking about the white collar workers necessarily, or big tech companies, although there's nothing wrong with those folks. Those services, it's excellent that they're proactive and they can lead the way in that. But we are seeing a different demand among commuters, and I think people are reassessing some of the other things that factor into the commute, like childcare. So how can these options benefit those more of those commuters, more commuters in general, again with that end goal of keeping people from just feeling like they have to hop in their single occupancy vehicle?
Well, Kate, you put the nail on the head. I mean, we're talking about democratizing access to transportation. Unfortunately, when it comes to transportation, there is a huge economic gap between everybody that either needs to use it or would prefer to use it. Again, in order to have, if we're looking at white collar, a lot of white collar employees can live in nicer neighborhoods. They are able to pay the property taxes to get wonderful transit lines and different commute benefits. Whereas if we're looking at the blue collar labor or blue collar labor workers, frontline workers, especially, which we've learned in the COVID space, it's a lot harder and it's a lot more challenging for them to have that access. I know in Austin, there's a huge wealth disparity, unfortunately, even though there's such great economic wealth and growth in our wonderful, beautiful city. There's still going to be a lot of challenges for those that need that transportation to get to and from work, or even if it's just an appointment or somewhere to go. It either takes them hours, or there's just not a line, or they have to walk 10 miles just to get to a bus stop. So that's definitely the big challenge that we're seeing as a big disparity. And as companies are continuing to move forward and getting people back to work, that's something that needs to be put in mind, especially for those that are the shift workers, that are their frontliners. What can they do to help support those individuals that do need transportation to get them to work? And, we're not in competition with public transportation. We're there to add that extra, I like to say we're the extra seasoning, the extra sprinkles you ask for after you get your ice cream cone, to help fill in those gaps that unfortunately public transportation can't help at the moment. I mean, and there's a lot of red tape when it comes to public transportation. The government moves so slow. We had our Project Connect bill finally pass, but that's still 10, 20, 30-year project. It's going to be a long time before we actually see what we want it to be. So what can we do to actually help in the forefront and be proactive? Well, definitely looking at shuttling and vanpooling as an option as we continue to welcome back our workers.
Great. Yeah, and Matthew, I'd like you to jump in on here on this one too, because we talked a little bit about pricing there.
Right. So I think the name of the game is affordability. We touched on flexibility, but I think in terms of this question, it centers around affordability. And Bobby brought up a nice tactic there with the marketplace type strategy to kind of bring those provider prices down and compete with each other. The thing with that is that we do need the fundamental model of these providers to alter, or there's going to be a minimum cap that these providers can go down to without increasing their burn rate, right? So I think this is an exciting time because a ride sharing model like the one that we use allows employers to build commuting plans at an affordable price. No longer is this privilege reserved for the big tech companies that can dish out tens of thousands of dollars for a single vehicle, right? During the times of the day when businesses aren't utilizing a vehicle in the ride sharing model, for their employee transportation, the vehicles aren't sitting in a parking lot in the evenings or nights, sitting idle, or during the lunchtime, not during the non-rushing hours. Instead, they're generating revenue on those off times by transporting groups using a platform, in our case, a FETI platform. Now, that versatility that the rideshare model provides gives us the ability to work with a variety of commuting budgets. And now, not only is this a revolutionary thing for smaller businesses who can now afford 1, 2, 3 vehicles to get their, let's say a group of 10 employees to the workplace. But in addition to that, big businesses are also seeing a revolutionary change in their commuting plans, thanks to ride-sharing models. With the affordability ride-sharing provides, companies are able to double or even triple their shuttle capabilities, which I think is important because increasing accessibility and convenience for their employers really changes the culture of a workplace. It's frustrating to see as an employee that, okay, my company, say it's a big tech company or a smaller one, has an option for a commuting, but I have to travel 10 miles to a park and ride, right, to reach it because my company can only afford 2, 3, 4 vehicles. If we can increase those fleets by triple, quadruple, it increases the accessibility and can now make multiple zones outside the downtown area or the domain area so that these employees can have a shorter time to get to the park ride zone and to get to the workplace, which increases accessibility, which I think is really important.
If I might jump in on a couple of things there, Kate. Just first of all, you started by talking about obviously the commute programs at the big tech companies. I just say I think there might be more going on outside the big tech companies than people are aware of. So yeah, we're working at things like fulfillment centers and warehousing and agricultural workers. There are things going on a bit below the radar. I entirely take Cherry's point about perhaps not as well known, not as ubiquitous. The other thing I wanted to mention, I'd be interested in Bobby's comment on this, is the other thing we're seeing is I've been talking and working on shared shuttle services to companies for quite a few years now. A change I'm seeing, obviously there are advantages of cost and the various models that companies can use, whether it's sharing shuttles or vanpools. The thing I'm seeing is maybe a few years ago, you go to a company and say, how about sharing the shuttle? And they would say, oh, but I'm concerned about confidentiality, our employees on a shuttle with other people. And now it's like, the world has changed. They take buses, they take trains, it'll be fine. We need to cut costs. We need to do this in a more efficient way. We need to realize that we all in this area need to work on congestion and greenhouse gas emissions and parking demand and so on. So I think there's people have sort of opened their eyes a little bit of saying we need to do things differently.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of what Dominic said and also what Matthew said, there's so much more talk. There's so much more going on in the commute space just outside of the tech world. We have partnerships with the federal government, military, local municipalities, local governments, strong partnership with the city of Austin, and as well as what Dominic's saying, distribution centers. We're seeing a huge uptick, especially during COVID times. The food processing, protein processing companies that have been having struggles with their employees' commutes, and seeing a huge uptick in demand in those different instances. So big tech may be at the forefront of saying, hey, commute solutions are very, very important, and this is what we're doing. They're the ones more likely to talk about it, whereas the more blue collar workers, they're just, they are doing it. It's just not as active as, hey, this is what we're doing, and we're going to be the change agents in our industry, so let's continue to talk about it, unfortunately. But that's what our job is to do, right? Educate the public and continue to talk about these things. And then another thing too, a common misconception about traditional vanpool, and then as we continue to move forward, dynamic vanpooling, is that you have to meet at a shared space. And you have to drive in, you have to walk in, you have to find a way to get into a shared space. That is a common misconception. What's great about vanpooling, and especially through the Commute with Enterprise platform, it's completely customizable to what works specifically to that group. Now, some groups do prefer to just drive in and meet at, if you're in Texas, a local HEB, Walmart, Home Depot, and meet together there and drive together. It's convenient too, because they can just walk in and get their groceries at the end of the day, or at a park and ride. But a lot of our vanpools, what we're seeing, especially the more successful ones, is sharing those driving responsibilities and making sure that they're picking each other up. That way they're not, stranded and needing to find an additional way to get to their park and ride. So that, again, like I said, it is a common misconception that people are thinking, hey, no, you have to go somewhere in order to hop onto a vanpool. That's not the case. It works for some groups, doesn't work for all of them. But you know what? As a mobility consultant in my role, it is my job to make sure that my participants know this is your experience. We can give recommendations, but at the end of the day, it's what works best for you. And that's why we see so much success within our vanpool programs, not just in Austin, but across the United States.
Great.
Pro tip, by the way. Oh, sorry, Kate.
Hold on. I just want to make sure that we also, Sharia was about to say something, and then I want to ask Jillian to weigh in as well, because I know We Drive You has a lot of different clients in different settings as well. And then we'll go to you, Bobby.
Actually, Jillian, you can go. I was going to say something on the lines of more operator agnostic stuff that I've seen. So you can tell us a little bit too, and then I'll jump back in.
Sure, I'll make it brief, but yeah, We Drive You does have a history. We've been actually headquartered in the Bay Area since 1988. So we're very familiar with the Silicon Valley tech companies, kind of where this whole idea of the tech fleet initiated. And so we've seen all of the good, the bad, and the ugly that surrounds kind of the history of tech companies providing services. But just to echo what Sherry said, it is, we do see a lot of other different customers. We have one single, bus or van programs that are servicing manufacturing, that are servicing essential workers. We've actually seen an uptick in that since the pandemic. So, I think that that's going to become very, very more common as we move along. And much like when you go to a new job and you say, what's my healthcare package going to look like? I think people are going to say, what's my commute package going to look like? That's going to be something that's very common, I think, across all levels and all industries. That is going to be something that people are just going to kind of expect to have. So it'll be interesting to see how that evolves as things move along, as we move back into returning to work, and people are really trying to hire and retain talent. I think it'll be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I completely agree. I think as someone from the side lens, I think operator agnostic, we're trying to create a platform that does take into account all of these. I think even at a high level, conceptually speaking, technology has been a huge catalyst to drive down this level of affordability too. And that's kind of what you're hearing, I think, across the board from different folks innovating, kind of doing new things. And We Drive You, everyone's been around for a really long time. Even when we first started looking into this TDM world almost 4 or 5 years ago, we knew that the source of ground truth for ridership data was still, the driver doing a 4-in-1 tally on pen and paper in Silicon Valley, in the Bay Area, where you have, autonomous fleets and cars going around. So I think it's been crazy to see all this from the sidelines too. We've partnered with a lot of folks that have come up with really exciting things. And I think this new, next experiment in flexibility is also going to, turn the wheels a bit. We know TDM folks are, banging their heads on the walls to see how we can cut down underutilization and still cater for the entire workforce and drive up and down, flexibility for options, to be able to just give employees choice. But I think, technology has been a huge enabler, and I think we'll continue to really drive a lot of the acceleration towards these pieces. And we're really excited to have so many partners that are all working on really exciting pieces, trying to take as much of this new transition back and really implement it in as much of a friendly way as possible. And I think to Bobby's point as well, we as a platform do see this a lot more as a team effort to really kind of build this partnership, build a sort of ecosystem as a holistic system that has a lot of different parts working together and kind of harmonizing across, vanpools and shuttle programs, and then kind of across the spectrum, even for employee engagement or first and last mile programs. And we've seen similar, even though we're not operating pieces ourselves, we've managed to leverage the same concepts of bringing great technology into this realm of TDM with automation and a lot of pieces to also drive down affordability for management systems, right? That's kind of what our sort of sweet spot is sliding into, regardless of these big systems that have been around for a while, which are also inaccessible to smaller companies, 100, 200 people, 500 people. But through this whole process, we've also seen companies try to do shared shuttles over years with 6 months of analyst work and trying to do cross-reference postcode data and really kind of and work and make it work too at that level with minimal technology. And now all of that 6 month, $100,000 kind of effort can be done with a few clicks, and that's sort of pieces of things that we're trying to really help broaden the spectrum out, really drive down the barriers and work with amazing folks, a lot of them on the panel too, and see how we can really help increase access, get more people, similar to even awareness. Like you mentioned, a lot of people outside of tech, a lot of the folks that we're talking to, returning to work is a common unifying pain point for everybody, especially in the workplace, facilities and real estate. And that's really brought people around the table to talk about employee commuting in a more streamlined way. I think that's really exciting for us to see as well.
100% agree with you, Sharia. Is that how you say your name? I'm so sorry. I'm really bad at
No, that was good. That's good.
Okay, perfect. Sharia. So, exactly what you're saying. At the end of the day, in this space, we're not trying to compete with each other, but we're trying to provide the necessary tools to y'all as employers in order to make sure that you're getting your employees to and from work in a cost-effective, sustainable way. And at the end of the day, it's to make your employees happy and promote the longevity of their time at your company. So even though it may seem competitive, I know that vanpooling is not going to work for everybody. I mean, enterprise understands usually it's about 10 to 20% of a workforce that this program can work for, because there are so many other wonderful options that work for that specific individual. We understand that. So that's what's so great about this commute, the commute space. We're not competing with each other. We're trying to help each other out. We want to make sure that everybody's successful. And at the end of the day, it's about the end user. It's about the end user, and it's about making sure that we are doing our part to not only drive down congestion, because it is terrible in Austin. And I can tell you here in Hawaii, it is awful here. We actually sat in the traffic to get 10 miles here. It took us about an hour and a half. Crazy. So that at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we're doing what we can as a team to provide those options to those as they get to and from work. And then back to what Jillian was saying, people are going to start asking, well, what's my commute benefit? We are definitely competing with different cities, especially the New Yorks, the Silicon Valleys in California, but they're actually starting to move to Texas, Miami, Chicago, that have these very, very healthy transit systems. So what can we do, especially in those that are more of a transit desert, make sure that we are remaining competitive and getting all that wonderful talent to come work for us in the places that we don't have readily accessible transit. And then also to add on to that, why they're also asking for commuter benefits is a lot of employees, the trend now is to look at the different sustainable investments, be it monetary or programs that their companies that they're interested in learning and working for are taking. I mean, a couple weeks ago, Google, Amazon, Facebook, the six big tech names in the industry are asking the SEC to provide more data about climate change. And that is unheard of. But what is something that we can do to help continue to tack on and improve those numbers? Because, you know, climate change is rampant. It's getting worse, and we have to figure out what we can do to also help the environment, because that's just that it's part of business models now, and it's also now what the most talked about thing is happening right now in our space. I mean, you can go onto your stock app, regardless if it's Acorn or Albert, or I mean, you know, anything like that, and they actually have now a section of sustainable investments. So that's something that we definitely need to recognize too. I'm not going to say this, but not saying that this is true, but if you don't care about your facilities costs or employees, well, guess what? They're going to care about sustainability. So that's something that you need to start looking at.
Yeah, good point. I'm going to let Dominic make one point, and then we're going to get to our last question and kick it off with Bobby, and then we'll have a few minutes for Q&A.
Okay, great, thank you. Just to pick up on what Cherry was saying, very quick one. And I mentioned this partly because it's cool, and that part of this topic is what can technology do and to help us out in general. One of the things we do in Track is we have a partnership with a company called Pachama. So everybody has a subscription to Track. We know what the miles are your vehicles are doing. We know what the gas mileage is. We make the corresponding offset payments to Pachama, and they do the validated carbon offsetting. So every vehicle running Track is by definition carbon neutral. Yeah, EVs ain't here yet. Good point. And there's all the reporting on that, of course. Anyway, thanks, Kate.
All right, great. Thank you all. One last question, like I said, and then we're going to get to Q&A. We've touched on this a little bit already. How can shuttles and vanpools work in tandem with other TDM tools? I think probably most people on this call know what TDM is, but just in case you don't, that's transportation demand management, and that's just spreading out the demand so that not everyone is using roads, say, to get to work or get around. So how can these modes that we're talking about today work in tandem with these other TDM tools and be part of an effective TDM strategy? And Bobby, why don't you go ahead and take this one to start?
Yeah, happily. They all matter. They all matter. They all matter equally, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Regardless of whether you have like a 2% mode split for micromobility, or you have a and you have a 20% mode split of another mode, and so on and so on. All of these things matter in the same way that I know Kate mentioned that she likes my chili analogy, so I'll drop that on you guys. TDM programs holistically work together, kind of like what Shoria was saying, when they're hand in hand, locked fingers. And it's much like making chili in the sense that in order to complete the recipe, you need every ingredient. The beans might represent shuttles, the onions might represent micromobility, even the broth might represent single occupancy vehicles, because some folks just need to drive. Like, yes, we're trying to reduce single occupancy vehicles, and to Cherry's point, climate change is, we are very far behind the 8 ball. So the time is definitely now. And in order to be successful with our business objectives and community objectives, we need all of these things in order to provide options. Really, it's about versatility. It's about making options available. And then it's about really taking the critical thinking out of, how do I use these benefits that my employer is making available to me in order to reduce my time, commuting to and from, the amount of money that I spend doing so, and my carbon impact. And so tools like what Shoria is mentioning really help to take that mental computing out and make it easy for folks to enact that behavior change.
Great, thank you.
Bobby, you're not from Texas, because beans and chili are a big no. no. But as he was saying, like he said beans, I was like, beans aren't in Chile. Oh, it's a Texas thing. But yeah, I completely agree with Bobby, and it's something that I said. Continuing to have conversations like this and including each other, inviting each other at the table, and being open to collaborations and understanding that, hey, your solution isn't the end all fits all. We got to make sure that we are sharing the space, playing nice in the sandbox, and ensuring that, hey, at the end of the day, we need to get these people to and from work in a cost-effective, sustainable way. So definitely having to continue to have conversations like this, and being able to understand each other's platforms a lot better too. That way we can be the total subject matter expert when it comes to transportation and movability. How you like that, Kate? In order to continue to push the, hey, let's create a better commuting world for those that end up needing it. So definitely more open collaboration. I don't think we have a problem with that in this group, but continuing to have those conversations as we continue to move forward.
Great. Any quick last points, Jillian or Matthew, before we jump on some great questions that we've got here?
Yeah, I can jump in real quick. I think, Bobby and Dominic and Sharia touched on. I think there are many great mobility management softwares out there that work great with a network of vehicles such as ours. These management softwares make it easy to integrate employee data to produce more efficient routes. They provide data-rich dashboards, insightful reports that they can relay to their employees, and I think that's a big part in reducing, our whole goal of emissions and congestion, because I believe that it can be very convincing to workers, and I believe that it can play a big role in changing the commuting culture of a workplace if they can see how much congestion they're relieving, how much personal vehicle depreciation they're avoiding, and things of that matter. And then in addition to data, the actual experience of a rideshare commute, such as ours or Jillian's or many other providers, is, I think, superior to driving alone, frankly. They get a first-class commute in a van or a bus or a shuttle or whatnot. They can sit back, relax, get a head start on their emails with onboard Wi-Fi. No longer do they need to sit in traffic and waste time that they could otherwise be using for daily tasks and work tasks.
Yeah, I'll slide in really quickly too before we head off. But yeah, I think, what you mentioned to kind of being able to leverage this commuting management platforms, like what Matthew just said as well, and to kind of find the right mix of things, where there's no really, one kind of silver bullet to this. It's really, and it's not even a one size fit all solution either, right? And that's kind of what's useful about platforms like ours and other similar solutions out there, is that, we can look at that data, we can look at those providers, and we know who does what well. That's part of the partnerships that we set up with folks to really understand, who shines in what and in what capacity in what area. And that's why we're able to kind of churn out that recipe, right? We can kind of, to Bobby's chili idea and to Cherry's, beans and analogy, we can find out whether you need beans in your chili or not based on where you're located, right? And that's sort of the idea of being able to kind of surface the right recipe, the exact one that we know your employees, at least in some capacity, will like, and maybe at least try a bite of, and then kind of see how addicted they get to that. But I think that's really key. It's the whole idea of bringing that ecosystem, kind of finding the right chili ingredients that you want to set in front of the table, and kind of being able to surface that in a low and efficient way. And then really quickly also on the sustainability part, I think Sherry mentioned this almost word to word, but we're actually starting to see a lot of more drive and then kind of incentives coming in, even from sustainability teams at companies who are now, like you mentioned, almost being forced to look into Scope 3, Scope 4 emissions from employee commuting. And that was a really big win, I think, from the pandemic, because companies were almost writing off emissions metrics because nobody's in the office. But then it kind of flipped the conversation, and we have really good friends even over at EarthUp and a lot of these other interesting tools that are looking into how employees working from home can completely cancel your emissions from the office, right? It has to come into somewhere you're still putting more stress on the grid. And we know that this is a question that's been coming up more from a real estate perspective, but the new piece is that now, commuting emissions and employee commutes have long been kind of forgotten our very, high level of estimates from surveys and things like that. But now with technology coming in, with a lot of different tools and services being able to talk to each other, we're really able to even drive adoption with sustainability teams to understand what my footprint really looks like, how are my commuting programs impacting not just employee well-being, my costs, but also the environmental impact and footprint that I have as a company. And we've known this for a while, but sustainability is really almost baked into the business model of commuting, right? So greener options are generally even more cost efficient. And this is just a matter of sort of awareness and the data not being able to surface that to folks. But once you start really digging into it and we plug into all these systems, we're really able to shine the light on the fact that sustainable is better, not just for the environment, but also for your wallets and also for your livelihood and well-being and all these pieces.
Jillian, you get the last word on this before I start with the Q&A.
I just really quickly wanted to say, Shoria, I love that you just dropped about the scope 4 emissions, because that is a big thing for folks that don't know. Being able to measure the carbon impact and footprint of a organization, even if their employees are from home, is going to be critical moving forward. So I guess that could have been part of the first question as well. I'll pass it back to you, Kay. I know we got a few more, one of which is from my friend Andrew.
Yes, and sorry, y'all, I think I'm having a little bit of an issue with the volume, but I will try to project. I'm going to launch into the Q&A here. There's a really great question that y'all should weigh in on. And that's the topic of ramped vans and what different folks offer. And this person, Linda, asked because in order to use a Metro paratransit service, one must live within 3/4 mile of a bus line and be headed to a workplace within 3/4 mile of a bus line, which turns your town into wagon wheel spokes, she says. So people with power wheelchairs need a van service instead. Hoping to hear good news. Does anyone want to address that?
Yes, so through Metro Rideshare Commute with Enterprise nationwide, we are ADA compliant. We are able to offer ramps, the hooks to make sure that the actual wheelchair is hooked down and is safe for them to still have their chair actually within the vehicle. We also offer the rotator ball for the steering wheel, and as well as extenders. That way, if you need that to use your hands to accelerate and brake, we offer that. So completely ADA compliant through Metro Rideshare and Commute with Enterprise, as well as our regular cart rentals. That's something that has been there and will be there to come.
Yeah, and let me just throw in something there. One of the areas we also operate is on paratransit services. And one of the things we can do there is you can keep any any information you wish about particular riders. So you could be logging, yes, this rider needs a particular van, they need help, whatever it is. So on the paratransit service, you know what to expect, you know what time to allow, the driver knows what they need to be doing, and so forth. So you can keep that history and make sure you provide the service people want.
Okay, I'm going to move on here. Bobby, you called out Andrew's question here. Is this the one that how are your companies platforms advancing or prioritizing electrification? That's something we're hearing more and more about, especially on the larger shuttle programs.
Yeah, I would love to kick that one off. A big part, Andrew, of electric vehicle implementation is figuring out how to unlock and untie the costs that are associated with it. And so that's where, when we talk about shared shuttle programs, it can be an impactful tool, not just to be able to unlock for small and medium-sized businesses, whether they have 5 employees and they're the ice cream shop that wants to purchase tickets on, a medium, larger employer who's offering that service, and then others can do so as well. But also beyond that, to share in the costs of something super expensive like an electric or an autonomous vehicle. And so what you do, much like splitting the cost of a really expensive Airbnb, which I think you and I had talked about before, Andrew, it's like, we may want to go and stay somewhere that's very spendy, $2,000 a night or so, which may not be achievable for one individual or a couple to do, but they get 10 friends, and now they get a really great place for a better value than the Holiday Inn or the Motel 6. The same concept can be applied to electric vehicles.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off of what Bobby said because totally agree. We all want to have electric vehicles and we think, great, let's put an electric vehicle into our services and our fleet, but nobody ever thinks about the back end. So being an operator, that of course is what we think about because we need to think about the logistics of how do we charge this, where do we charge it, how do we find the space to set up the infrastructure. So from We Drive You standpoint, with all of, as I mentioned before, a lot of our customers are talking about moving to electric vehicles. So we are putting into place initiatives to set up electric vehicle charging facilities, working with customers to understand what their fleet needs are going to be, how we can spread that cost over multiple customers to, in fact, reduce that cost to make it not only environmentally impactful for the customers, but also financially valuable as well.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, y'all. I think unless anyone has any very quick last burning things to get in, and hearing none, I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up and give y'all back 1 minute of your day. So I hope this has been helpful. I think this is a topic that we could talk about for a long time. There's a lot here, especially as we consider how the commute has changed and what all of the options are. So thank you all for joining us today. And thank you so much to our panelists. Please do check out Movability's social media streams, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. Check out our website, movabilitytx.org for more information on other upcoming events and programs. And we hope you all have a wonderful day, whichever time zone you're in.
Thanks, Kate.
Thank you, Kate.
Wonderful job.
Bye, all. Thanks.
Good job, Kate. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hey, all.
Bye all.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.